Yep. Okay, I'll be starting now. So, chapter 11. As Stella looked up at the great beauty, she felt for the first time that her own dress, pretty as it was only satin. She had not been conscious of it before, but she felt it now in the presence of this exquisitely dressed woman. In very truth, Lady Lenore was well dressed. It was not only that her costumes came from Redfern's or Worth's, and her millinery from Louise, but Lenore had acquired the art of wearing the productions of these artists. When looking at her, one was forcibly reminded of the Frenchman's saying that the world was divided into two classes: the people who were clothed and the people who wore the clothes. Lady Lenore belonged to those who made their clothes. The beautiful dress sat upon her as if she had been made to wear it, instead of it to her. Not a piece of lace, not a single article of jewelry, but sat in its place gracefully and artistically. Hey guys, thank you so much for the donations. Thank you. Thank you for Miko Chris, and thank you so much for the donations and likes. Thank you guys so much. Tonight, she wore a dress composed of some soft and readily made draping material, neither cashmere nor satin. Some one of the new materials which have come over from the Far East, and of which we scarcely yet know the names. It was one of the most delicate shade of greyish blue, which was brought out and accentuated by the single camellia resting amidst the soft lace on her bosom. The arms were bare from the elbows, exquisitely, warmly and white, and beautifully formed. There's one heavy bracelet set with huge Indian pearls. Lined the wrist, there were very similar huge pearls in the rings of her fingers, and in the pendant which hung by a seed pearl necklace. Ari, don't worry about it, okay? Don't worry about it, guys. Imagine a beautiful and almost faultless beautiful face, rising from once the delicate harmony of color. Imagine a pair of dark eyes, now blue, now violet, as she stood in repose and smiled by long silken lashes. And you may imagine the bare material outward beauty of Lady Lenore Beauchamp, but no words can describe what really was the charm of the face, its wonderful power of expression, its elegant mobility, which, even when the eyes and lips were in rapport, drew you to watching and waiting for them to start and speak. Stella, though she scarcely heard those lips utter a word, knew what Uncle meant when he said there was a peculiar fascination about her which was beyond her mere beauty. And as she looked, a strange feeling crossed Stella's mind. She remembered an old story which she had heard years and years ago when she was sitting on the lap of her Italian nurse, the story of the strange and beautiful Indian serpent which sits beneath the tree, fixing its eyes upon the bird overhead, draws and charms it with its spell until the bird drops senseless and helpless to its fate. But even though that she was ashamed of the idea, even though there is nothing serpent-like in Lenore's beauty, only this, Stella thought, that if ever those eyes and lips smiled and murmured to a man, "I love you," that man must drop. Resistance would be vain and useless. All this takes long to write, It flashed across Stella's mind in a moment, even as they looked at each other in silence. And then at last, Lady Lenore spoke. So, I'm going to be doing something different today. I will not be voice acting the characters, I'll just be narrating the story. Okay, guys. Okay. Have you been gathering primroses today? She said, with a smile. It was a strange way of beginning an acquaintance, and Stella felt the color mount to her face. The words recalled the whole of the scene of yesterday morning. The speaker intended that they should. No, she said, not today. Miss Atteridge gathered enough yesterday for a week. Did you not? Said Lord Leicester. And the voice sounded to Stella like an assistance. She half glanced at him gratefully, and met his eyes fixed on her with a strange light in them that caused her to drop again. I must find this wonderful flower land, said Lady Lenore. Lillian was quite eloquent about it last night. We shall be happy to act as pioneers in the discovery, he said, and Stella couldn't help noticing the we. Did she mean she and he? With a question mark. Hey Tina, thank you so much for the gift. At that moment, Lady Winwood came toward them and murmured something to him. And he left them and offered his arm to a lady at the other end of the room. And then Lady Winwood waved her fan slightly and then smiled. A tall, thin, fair-haired man came up. Lord Charles, will you take charge of Miss Atteridge? Lord Guilford bowed and offered his arm. I shall be delighted, he said, and he smiled down at Stella in his frank way. 1 second, guys, give me a second. Okay, are you guys okay with it so far? How's everyone doing in the chat? Give me a quick moment. Need to check something real quick. Yeah, I'm not going to be doing the voice acting today. I'm just narrating today. Good morning, hi, good morning to those who is, a different time zone, and good afternoon to those, and good evening as well. Let me continue. I shall be delighted, he said, and he smiled down at Stella in his frank way. There was a general movement. Ladies and gentlemen were pairing off and moving towards the door, which stood the 2 footmen, with the solemn air of soldiers attending an execution. 7 minutes late, said Lord Charles, glancing up at the clock as they passed. We must chalk up to Lady Lenore. I admire and envy her courage. Don't you, Miss Atteridge? I should no more dare to be late for dinner at Winwood than... What's the most audacious thing you can think of? Stella smiled. There was something catching in the light-hearted, frank and free tones of the young Viscount. Standing on the sofa in muddy boots has always been my idea of a great social crime, she said. He laughed approvingly, and his laugh seemed to float lightly through the quiet room. That's good. That's awfully good, he said, with intense enjoyment, standing on the sofa. We must tell Leicester that. Did you ever do it, by the way? Never, said Stella, gravely, but with a smile. No, he said. Do you think you are capable of it if you were provoked? Provoked? said Stella. Dare, I mean. You know, we used to have a game at school called Dare Him. I expect all fellows have played it. One fellow does the most extraordinary things and dares the other fellow to do it. Leicester used to play it best. He was a regular good hand at it. The worst of all is that we used to get trashed. The masters didn't care about half a dozen fellows flinging stones at the window and climbing on the roof of the dead of night. Poor masters, said Stella. He laughed. Yes, they didn't have a particularly fine time of when Leicester was at school. As he spoke, he glanced at the tall figure of Lord Leicester in front of them, with an admiring air such as a schoolboy might wear. There isn't much Leicester wouldn't dare, he said. They entered the dining room, a large room lined with oak and magnificently furnished, in which the long table, with its snowy cloth and glittering plate and glass, shone out conspicuously. Lord Guilford found no difficulty in discovering their seats, each place being distinguished by a small tablet bearing the name of the intended occupant. As Stella took her seat, she noticed a beautiful bouquet beside her serviette, and saw there was one place for every lady in the room. A solemn, stately butler, who looked like a bishop, stood beside the Earl's chair, and with a glance or slight movement of his hand, directed the noiseless footman. The clergy said grace, and then dinner commenced. Stella, looking round, saw that her uncle was seated near Lady Winwood, and that Lady Lenore was opposite herself. She looked round for Lord Leicester and was startled to hear his voice at her left. He was speaking to Lady Longford, and as she turned to him she looked at him, and she happened to catch Lady Winwood's eye also fixed upon him with a strange expression, and wondered what it might be. The next moment she knew. Bending his head and looking straight before him, he said, "Do you like your flowers?" Stella took up the bouquet. It was composed almost entirely of white blossoms and smelt divinely. "These are beautiful," she said. "Heliotrope and camellias, my favorite flowers." "It must have been instinct," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked. "I chose them," he said in the same voice. "Chose them?" she retorted. "Yes." And then he smiled. "That was what made me late. I came in here first and had a grand review of the bouquets. Was curious to know if I could guess your favorite flowers." You changed them?" said Stella, with a feeling of mild horror. "Lord Guilford asked me just now what I considered the audacious act a man would commit. I know now," he smiled. "I changed something else," he said. Stella pointed and looked at him inquiringly. There was a bold smile in his eyes. He pointed to the little tablet bearing his name. "This. I found it over there, next to that old lady in the emeralds. She's a dreadful old lady. Beware of her. She is a politician, and she'll always ask everyone who comes near her what they think of present Parliament. I thought it would be nicer to come over here." The color crept slowly into Stella's face, and then her eyes dropped. It was very wrong, she said. I'm sure Lady Winward will be angry. How could you interfere with the arrangements? They all seem so solemn and grand to me. He laughed softly. They are. We always eat our meals as if they were the last we could expect to have, and as if the executioner was waiting outside and feeling the edge of the axe impatiently. There's only one man who dares to laugh outright. Who is that? Asked Stella. He nodded to Lord Guilford, who was actively engaged in bending his head over his soup with the air of a hungry man. Charlie, he said. Lord Guilford, I mean. He laughs. Don't you, Charlie? Yes. Oh, yes. What is he telling you about me, Miss Atteridge? Don't believe a word he says. I mean to have him up for libel some day. He says you laugh everywhere, said Stella. Lord Charles laughed at once, and Stella looked around half alarmed, but nobody seemed to faint or show any particular horror. Nobody minds him, said Lord Leicester, balancing his spoon. He's like the king's jester, licensed to play wheresoever he pleases. I am fearfully hungry, said Lord Charles. I've been in the saddle since 3 o'clock. Is that the menu, Miss Atteridge? Let us mark our favorite dishes. And then he offered her a half-whole of porcelain tablet, on which was written the items of the various courses. Stella looked down the long list, with something like an amused dismay. It's dreadfully long, she said. I don't think I have any favorite dishes. No, not really, he demanded. What a treat. Will you really let me advise you? I shall be most grateful, said Stella. Oh, this is charming, said Lord Guilford. Next to choosing one's own dinner, there's nothing better than choosing one for someone else. Let me see. And thereupon he made a careful selection, which Stella broke into an amused laugh. Thank you, Fumiko Chris. That's a bit too much. Thank you for the donations. But you must, he said. Why? I have been most careful to pick out the only dishes suitable for a lady's delicate appetite. You can't leave one out. You can't. Indeed. Without spoiling your dinner. My dear, said the Countess, bending forward, don't let him teach you anything except to take warning from his Epicureanism. He's only anxious that you should be too occupied to disturb him. Lord Charles laughed. That is cruel, he said. You take my advice, Miss Atteridge. There are only 2 things I understand, and there are a horse and a good dinner. Meanwhile, the dinner was proceeding, and to Stella it seemed like good, scarcely adequate, described it. One elaborate course after another followed in quick and slow succession, borne in by the richly liveried footmen on the massive plate, for which Winwood Hall was famous for. Hey guys, thank you so much for the follow. Dishes, which she had never heard of, seemed to make their appearance only to pass out again untouched, excepting by the clergyman, Lord Guilford, and 1 or 2 other gentlemen. Hey Lucille, thank you so much for the like. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for the gifts. She noticed that the Earl scarcely touched anything beyond the tiny piece of fish and a mutton cutlet. And then Lord Guilford who seemed to take an interest in anything connected with dinner, he remarked, as he glanced at the stately head of the house. "There is one other person who is of your way of thinking, Miss Atteridge, and I mean the Earl. He doesn't know what a good dinner means. I don't suppose he will taste anything more than a fish and a piece of Cheshire. When he's in town and at work," there's an abrupt Stella cut him abruptly. "At work?" "Well, in the House of Lords, you know. He is a member of the cabinet." Stella nodded. "He's a statesman." "Exactly. He generally dines off a mutton chop served in the library. I've seen him lunching off a penny biscuit and a glass of water. Terrible, isn't it?" Stella laughed. "Perhaps he can find work better on the chop and a glass of water." "Don't believe it," retorted Lord Guildford. "No man can work well unless he is well fed." "Guildford ought to know," said Lord Leicester audibly. "He does so much work." "So I do," retorted Lord Charles. "Stay and keep you in order, and if that isn't hard work, I don't know what is." This is all very amusing for Stella. It was also too strange. And so, little what she imagined, here were two peers talking like schoolboys for her amusement, as if they were mere nobodies, and she was somebody worth amusing. Every now and then, she could hear Lady Lenore's voice, musical and soft, yet full and distinct. She was talking of the coming season. Stella had heard her speak of great people, persons' names which she had read of, but never expected to hear of so familiarly. It seemed that she had gotten in some charmed circle. It scarcely seemed real. Thus, occasionally, but very seldom, the Earl's thin, clear, high-bred voice would be heard, and once he looked across at Stella and herself and said, "Will you not try some of those rissoles, Miss Atteridge? They are generally very good." "And he never touches them," murmured Lord Charles with a mock groan. "Hey, Nana, thank you so much for the gifts." She could hear her uncle talking more fluently than he was at home to Lady Winwood, who was speaking about the pictures, and once Stella saw her glance in her direction, it was as if she had been speaking of her. The dinner seemed very, very long, but it came to an end at last, and then the Countess rose. As Stella rose with the rest of the ladies, the old Countess of Longford locked her arms in hers. "I'm not so old that I can't walk, and I'm not lame, my dear," she said. "But I like something young and strong to lean upon, and then you are both. You don't mind?" "No," said Stella. "Yes, I'm strong." Hi guys, welcome. I am reading A Girl's Love by Charles Garvice. It is a pretty long book. It is a fantasy, fiction, medieval time, story, romance. So, yeah. Okay, where was I? Okay, that's good to hear, Ari. They passed into the drawing room. Not the lady that had entered first, but a smaller room which bore the name of My Lady's. It was exquisitely furnished in the modern antique style. There were some beautiful hangings that covered the walls and served as background for costly cabinets and brackets. upon which was arranged in a collection of ancient china second to none in the kingdom. The end of the room opened into a fernery, in which were growing tall palms and a whole miniature forest of maidenhair, kept moist by sparkling fountains that fell with a plash into marble basins. Birds were twittering and flitting above and beyond and behind a wire netting, so slight and carefully concealed as to be scarcely perceivable. Well, no footman was allowed to enter this lady's paradise. Two maids in their soft black dresses and snowy caps were moving about, arranging a table for the countess to serve tea upon. It was like a scene from the Arabian Nights, only more beautiful and luxurious than anything Stella had imagined, even when reading that wonderful book of fairy tales. The countess went straight to her table and took off her grey-white gloves. Some of the ladies settled themselves into the most indolent of attitudes on the couches and chairs, and others strolled into the front house. The old countess made herself comfortable on the low divan and made room for Stella beside her. "And this is your first time to Windward Hall, my dear?" she said. "Yes," answered Stella, her eyes still wandering around the room. "And you live in that little village on the other side of the river?" "Yes again," said Stella. "It is pretty, is it not?" "It is, as pretty as anything in one of your uncle's pictures. And are you quite happy?" Stella brought her eyes upon the pale and wrinkled face. "Happy? Oh yes, quite," she said. "Yes, I think you are," said the old lady with a keen glance at the beautiful face and bright and pure eyes. "Then you must keep so, my dear," she said. "But isn't that rather difficult?" said Stella with a smile. Lady Longford looked at her. That serves me right for meddling," she said. "Yes, it is difficult. Very difficult. And yet the art is easy enough. It contains only one rule, and that is to be content." "Then I shall continue to be happy," said Stella. "For I am very, very content." For the present," said the old lady. "Take care, my dear." Stella smiled. It was a strange sort of conversation, and there was a suggestion of something that didn't really appear on the surface. "Do you think that I look discontented, then?" she asked. "No," said the old lady, eyeing her again. No, you look very contented at present." "Isn't that a beautiful forest?" And it was an abrupt change of subject, but Stella was equal to it. "I was admiring it since I came in," she said. "It is like fairyland." "Go and enter it," said the old countess. "I'm going to sleep for exactly 10 minutes. Will you come back to me then? You see, I am very frank and rude, but I am very old indeed." Stella rose with a smile. "I think you are very kind to me," she said. The old countess looked up at the beautiful face with the dark, soft eyes bent down on her. and something like a sigh of regret came into her old and keen eyes. You know exactly how to make pretty speeches, my dear, she said. You learned that in Italy, I expect. Mind you come back to me. Then, as Stella moved away, the old lady looked after her. Poor child, she murmured. Poor child. She is but a child, but he won't care. Is it too late, I wonder? But why should I worry about it? But it seemed if she must worry about it, whatever it was, for a few minutes' effort to sleep, she rose and went across the tea table. Lady Winwood was making tea, but looked up and pushed a chair close beside her. What is it? She asked with a smile. Who is she? Okay. I don't know, of course. I know that she is Miss Etheridge's niece, but I don't know anything about her, except that she has just come here from Italy. She said that she was not happy there. She's very beautiful, murmured the Countess. She is very indeed, assented Lady Winwood. Hi, thank you so much, Emerald. No, I am not an AI model. Thank you, Ari. And thank you, Hana. Yes, I am well aware. Thank you for that pointer. And something more than distinguished. I saw a more graceful girl. She's only a child, of course. Quite a child, assented Lady Winwood. There was a pause, and then the old Countess said, almost abruptly, Why is she here? Lady Winwood filled the cup carefully before replying. She's a friend of Lillian's, she said. At least she invited her. I thought she was rather a friend of Leicester's, said the old lady. Lady Winwood looked at her, and with a faint color came into her aristocratic face. You mean that he has noticed her, she said. Very much. I sat next to him in dinner. Was it wise to put him next to her? A child's head is quickly turned. I did not arrange it so, replied Lady Winwood. I put his tablet next to Lenore's as usual, but then it got moved. I don't know who could have done such a thing. I did not arrange it so. Well, I do, said the old lady. It was Leicester himself. I'm sure of it by the way he looked. Lady Winwood's white brow contracted for a moment. It is like him. He would do or dare anything for an hour's amusement. I ought to be angry with him. Be as angry as you like, but don't let him know that you are, said the old lady. Lady Winwood understood. Well, how beautiful Lenore looks tonight, she said, looking across the room where Lady Lenore stood, fanning herself, her head thrown back and her eyes fixed on a picture. Yes, assented the old Countess. If I were a man, I should not rest until I had imagined I had won her. But then the men are so different to what we imagined they would be. They turn aside from a garden lily to pluck aside a wayward flower. Yes, muttered the old Countess. After they have grown tired of the wildflower and then thrown it aside. As she spoke, the curtains were withdrawn and the gentleman came sauntering in. No one person rests long over the wine, and nowadays the Earl scarcely drank a glass after the ladies left. He would fill his glass, fill two perhaps, but rarely did he sip more than to finish them. Lord Leicester would take a bumper. It seemed as if he had taken an additional one, for there was a deeper color to his face and a brighter light in his eyes than usual. The light which used to shine, and in his school days, when there were some pieces of wildness on, well, now they shine more mad than usual. Lord Guildford came in leaning lightly upon his arm and was talking to him in a low voice. One of the most beautiful faces I've seen. Leigh, it's not your regular cut-out pattern kind of face, but fresh and natural. That sort of face Venus might have had when she rose from the sea that fine morning. Hush, said Lord Leicester, with a slight start, and he thought of the picture in his room. The picture of the Venus with a pale, fair face, a cross which had drawn the defacing brush that night, and come home from his meeting with Stella. And hush, they will hear you. And yes, she is beautiful. Okay, 1 second, guys. Let me drink a cup of water. You guys enjoying your time so far? Okay. Where was I? Okay. Yes, beautiful. Take care, Leigh, muttered Lord Charles. Leicester put his hand from him. Leicester put his hand from him with a smile. You talk in parables tonight, Charlie, and don't provide the key. Go and get some tea, please. He went himself towards the table and got a cup, but his eyes wandered round the room. The old Countess and Lady Winwood noticed the searching glance. Leicester, said his mother, will you ask Lenore to sing for us? He put his cup down and went down the room where she was sitting beside the Earl. My mother has sent me as one of her ambassadors to the Queen of Music, he said. Will your Majesty deign to sing for us? She looked at him with a smile, and then gave her cup to one of the maids, and put her hand upon his arm. Do you know that this is the first time you have spoken to me since I cannot remember. One does not dare intrude upon royalty too frequently. It is presumptuous, he said. In what am I royal? She asked. In your beauty, of course, he said, and he was the only man in the room who would have dared so pointed a reply. Thanks, she said, with a calm smile. You are very frank tonight. Am I? And why not? We do not hesitate to call the summer sky blue or the ocean vast. There are some things so palpable and generally acknowledged that to be reserved about them would be quite absurd. That will do, she said. Since when have you learned such elegant phrases? Then, what shall I sing? Or shall I sing at all? To please me, you have but to sing to please yourself, he said, Find me something then, she said, and sat down with her hands folded, looking for looking like a very queen indeed. He knelt down beside the Cattenbury, and as a signal, there was a general gathering round the piano. But she sat calm and unconscious, very queen-like indeed. Leicester found a song and set it up for her. He opened the piano, took her bouquet from her lap, and waited for her gloves. The rest looking on as if interference was quite out of the question. Slowly, she removed her gloves and gave them to him, touched the piano with her jeweled fingers, and began to sing. At this moment, Stella, who had been wandering round the fernery, came back to the entrance and stood listening and absorbed. She had never heard so beautiful a voice, not even in Italy. But presently, even while a thrill of admiration was running through her, she became conscious that there was something wanting. Her musical sense was unsatisfied. The notes were clear, bell-like actually, and as harmonious as a thrush. The modulation, perfect. But there was something wanting. Was it heart? From where she stood, she could see the lovely face, with its dark violet eyes upturned, its eloquent mouth curved to allow the music vent, and loveliness held her in thrall indeed, though the voice did not move her. The song came to an end, and the singer sat with a calm smile, receiving the murmurs of gratitude and appreciation. But she declined to sing again, and as Stella saw Lord Leicester hand her gloves and bouquet, and stand ready to conduct her, he stands her like a slave, her slave, to obey her slightest wish, she thought. Ah, how happy she must be. And with something that was almost a sigh, she turned back to the dim calm of the infirmary. She felt strangely alone and solitary at that moment. Suddenly, there was a step behind her, and then looking up, she saw Lord Leicester. "I have found you," he said, and there was a ring of satisfaction and pleasing in his voice that went straight to her heart. "Where have you been?" She looked up with a handsome face full of life and strong manhood, and then her eyes fell. I have not been hiding," she said. "I've been here." "You're right," he said, seating himself beside her. This is the best place. It is cool and quiet here. It is more like our woods, while at the same time it is not, with the ferns and the primroses." And then at the hour, he smiled into her eyes. "It is very, very lovely here," she said. "It's all lovely. How beautifully she sings," she added, rather irrelevantly. "Sings?" he said. "Oh, Lenore, yes, she sings well. Perfectly, actually. And that reminds me, I've been sent to ask you to make music for us." And then Stella shrank back with a glance of alarm. "I? Oh, no. I could not." He smiled at her. "But your uncle, he should not," said Stella, with a touch of crimson. "I could not sing. I'm afraid." afraid. You, he said. Of what? Of everything, she said with a little laugh. I cannot sing before all these people. I have never done so. Besides, to sing after Lady Lenore would be dancing a hornpipe. I should be content if you would dance a hornpipe, he said. I should think it good and wise. Are you laughing at me? She said, looking at the dark eyes. Why? Laughing at you, he repeated. I could not. It is you who laugh at me. I think that you are laughing at me almost all the time. You will not sing then? I cannot, she said. Very well, then you shall not, he responded. You shall not do anything you do not like. But sometime you will sing for us, will you not? Your uncle has been telling us about your voice and how you came about it. And his own voice grew wonderfully gentle. My father, he meant, said Stella simply. Yes, he could sing. He was a great musician. And when I think of that, I'm inclined to resolve never to open my lips again. Okay. And there was a moment's pause. Stella sat pulling a piece of maidenhair apart, her eyes downcast. His eyes were reading her beautiful face and noting the graceful turns of the white neck. Someone was playing the grand piano. The music floated in and about the tall plums. It was an intoxicating moment for him. The air was balmy with perfumes, and the beauty of the girl beside him seemed to entrance him. Hi, welcome everyone to the reading. Just to quickly say, I'm reading a book called A Girl's Love. Yep. Where was I? Instinctively, his hand, being idly near her, went towards her. And then he would have almost touched it. But suddenly, one of the maids entered, and with a slow, respectful air, approached both of them. She held a silver salver on which lay a small note, folded in a lover's knot. Lord Leicester looked up. The interruption came just in time. For me, he said. For Miss Atteridge, my lord, replied the maid. I can guess from who is it from, he said, with a smile. Lillian is growing impatient, if she was ever that. Stella then unfolded the note. This was it. Will you come up to me now, if you care to? Hello, hi everyone. Oh yes, I will go at once, she said, standing up. He rose with a sigh. It is the first time I have envied Lillian anything, he said, with a low voice. This way, if you please, said the maid. A moment, just a moment, said Lord Leicester, and as Stella stopped, he gathered a few sprays of maidenhair from the margin of the fountain. It is a peace offering. Will you take it to her? I promised that I would ask you to go directly after dinner, he said, softly. Yes, she said. And as she took it, there rose once more in her mind the word Jasper Addleston had spoken. Infamous. This man who sent his sister such a message in such a voice. Thanks, he said. But it was scarcely necessary. I've sent her something more beautiful, more precious. Stella didn't understand for a moment, and then her eyes met his, and then she knew he meant herself. And then color flooded her face. You should not say that, she said, gravely, and before he could answer, she moved away. The maid led her through the door, upstairs, across the corridor, and knocked at Lady Lillian's door. Stella then entered, and a grave peace seemed to fall upon her. Lady Lillian was lying on the couch by the window, and raised herself to hold out her hand. How good of you to come, she said. As the voice broke on Stella's ear, she knew what Lady Lenore's voice wanted. You think me very selfish to bring you away from all of them, do you not? She added, still holding Stella's hand in her white, cool one. No, I'm very glad to come. I would have come before, but I didn't know whether I might. I have been waiting, and I did not like to send for you, said Lady Lillian. Lady Lillian, sorry, English hard. Give me a second, guys. And then, have you had a pleasant evening? Stella sank into a low seat beside the couch and looked up at the lovely face with a smile. I've had a wonderful evening, she said. Lady Lillian looked at her inquiringly. Wonderful, said Stella, frankly. You see, I've never been in such a place as this before. It all seems so grand and beautiful. More beautiful than grand indeed. And I can scarcely believe it is real. Yes, it is real. Far too real, in fact, said Lady Lillian with a smile and a little sigh. I dare say you think it's very nice, and do you want to know what I think? Stella shook her head. I think, as I look down at your little cottage, at how beautiful, how nice life must be. Mine, said Stella. Yes, it is very nice, but this is wonderful. Because you're not used to it, said Lady Lillian. Lillian, you would get soon tired of it. Believe me. Never, breathed Stella, looking down. As she saw the maiden hair, and then she held it up. Lord Leicester sent these to you, she said. A loving light came into Lady Lillian's eyes as she took the green, fragrant sprays. Leicester, she said, touching her cheek with them. Oh, this is so like him. He's too good to me. Stella looked across the room with a picture of Madonna rising from the earth, and with upturned, glorious eyes. Is he? She murmured. Oh, yes. There have never been such and never was a brother like him in all the wide world, said Lady Lillian in a rapt voice. I cannot tell you how good he is to me. He's always thinking of me. He who has so much to think about. I fancy sometimes that people are apt to deem him selfish, and then thoughtless. But they do not know. No, said Stella. The voice sounded like music in her ears. She could have listened forever while it sung his song. And yet, that word suddenly rang out in discord, and she smiled. He seems very kind, she said. He's very kind to me. Lady Lillian looked at her suddenly, and an anxious expression came into her eyes. It was not many nights ago that she implored Leicester to see more of the girl with the dark eyes and silky hair. And here was the girl sitting at her feet. And it was her doing. She had not thought of that before. She had been so fascinated by the fresh young beauty, by the pure, frank eyes, that she had actually acted against her own instincts and brought her into Leicester's path. Yes, he's very kind to everyone. And you have enjoyed yourself? Have they been singing? Yes, Lady Beauchamp. Lenore, said Lillian eagerly. Yes. Does she not sing beautifully? And is she not lovely? Yes, she sings beautifully, and she is indeed lovely, said Stella, still looking at the Madonna. Lady Lillian laughed softly. I'm very fond of Lenore. You will like her very much when you know her better. She is, I was going to say, very imperial. That would be most right, said Stella. She is like a queen, only more beautiful than most queens have been. I'm so glad that you admire her, said Lady Lillian, and she paused a moment, and her white hand fell like a leaf down on the dark head beside her. Shall I tell you a secret? Stella looked up with a smile. Yes, I will promise to keep it. Lady Lillian smiled down at her. How strange you said that, so gravely. Yes, I think he would keep a secret to the death. But this is not one of the sorts. It is only this, that we hope, all of us, that Lenore will become my sister. Stella did not start, did not remove her eyes from the pale and lovely face, but into those eyes something came that was not wonder nor pain, but a strong, indefinable expression, as if she was holding her breath in the effort to suppress any sign of feeling. Do you mean that Lord Leicester will marry her? Said distinctly. Lady Lillian nodded. Yes, that is it. Will it not be nice? Stella forced a smile. For Lord Leicester. Lady Lillian laughed a soft but curious laugh. What a strange girl you are, she said, smoothing the silky hair. What am I to say that? Well, yes, of course. And for Lenore, too, she added, with a touch of pride. Yes, for Lenore also, said Stella, and her eyes went back to the Madonna. We are all so anxious to see Leicester married, went on Lady Lillian with a smile. They say he is, what's the word, so wild. They do not see him as I see him. Do you think he is wild? Stella paled. The strain was great. Her heart was beating with suppressed throbs. The gentle girl did not know how she was torturing her with such questions. She murmured. I do not know. I can't tell. How should I? I scarcely know, your brother. Ah, no, I forget, said Lady Lillian. To me, it seems as if we had known each other for so long, and we had only met the other morning for a few minutes. How is it? You possess some charm? Or did you conceal it with the flowers you gave me, so that I am under a spell, Stella? That is your name, isn't it? It is a beautiful name. Are you angry with me for calling you by name? Angry? No. No, said Stella, putting up her warm and firm hand and touching a thin one resting on her hair. No, I quite like that you call me by my name. And you will call me by mine, Lillian, if you wish it, said Stella. Yes, I will. Oh, and we shall be great friends. See, I've kept your flowers quite cool and fresh. And then she pointed to a vase which the primroses stood on the other end of the room. You see, I love wildflowers. They are heaven's very own, are they not? No human hand does anything for them or helps them grow. Stella listened to the low and beautiful voice with a rapt awe. Lady Lillian looked down at her with a smile. I wonder whether you would grant me a favor if I ask it, she said. I would do anything for you, said Stella, looking up at her. Will you go and play for me? She said. I know you can play and sing because I've looked into your eyes. Suppose I say that I cannot, said Stella with a laughing tone. You cannot, said Lady Lillian. I am never mistaken. Lord Leicester says that I am a witch in such matters. Well, I will try, said Stella. And she crossed the room and opened the tiny piano and began to play a sonata by Schubert. I cannot play like Lady Lenore, she said, almost to herself, but Lady Lillian heard her. You play exquisitely, she said. No, I can't play, repeated Stella, with an almost touch of impatience. And then she looked up and saw the Madonna, and on the impulse of the moment began to sing Gonuts of Maria. There's no more exquisite piece of devotional music in the world, and it was Stella's favorite. She had sung it so often and often in the dreary school days, with a longing heart in her voice. She had sung it in the solemn cathedrals, and while the incense rose to the vaulted roof. But she had never sung it as she sang it now that the strange, indefinable pain was filling her heart with wistful, vague longing for Leicester. Lady Lillian leaned forward, her lips parted, her eyes filling with tears, so rapt that she did not notice that the door had opened, and then Lord Leicester stood in the room. When she did not see him, he held up his hand to silence any word of greeting, and while stood with his head lowered, his eyes fixed on Stella's face, upturned, white, and rapt. As he listened, his handsome face grew pale. His dark eyes deepened with intense emotion. He had stood there beside the piano, leading downstairs while Lady Lenore had been singing, with calm and polite attention. Here, and at this moment, his heart beat and throbbed with an intense longing to bend and kiss the upturned face, with an intense longing to draw the eyes towards his, to silence the exquisite voice, to change his imploring prayer into a song of love. All unconsciously, Stella sang until the end, and then that last, lingering, exquisite, long-drawn sigh. She turned and saw him, but she did not move. She only turned pale, and then her eyes fixed on his. And so they looked at each other. With an effort, he broke the spell and moved. But he did not speak to her at once, but to Lillian first. "I have brought you something," he said, in a low voice, and he held up the sketch. Lady Lillian uttered a cry of delight. "And it is for me. Oh, Leicester, that is nice. It is beautiful. I know who painted it. It was your uncle, Stella." "Yes, I know." "You're right," said Leicester, and then he went towards Stella. "How can I thank you?" he said. "I know now why you will not sing to us downstairs. You were quite right. I will not have you sing to a mob in drawing room. After dinner, of course. What shall I say?" "What can I say?" Stella looked up pale and almost breathless beneath the passionate fire that burned in his eyes. I did not know you were here," she said at last. "Oh, or you would not have sung, I'm guessing. I'm glad I came. I cannot say how glad. You will not sing again?" No, she said. No. I did not think you would, and yet I would give you something to hear you once. Only once more." "No," said Stella, and she rose and went back to her seat. "Isn't it beautiful?" said Lady Lillian in a murmur. "I have been richly endowed tonight. Your song and this picture. How exquisite it was. Where do you learn to sing like this?" "Nowhere, Lord Leicester. That cannot be learnt." Lillian looked at him. He was still pale, and his eyes seemed to burn with suppressed eagerness. "Well, go and thank Mr. Atteridge," she said. "Presently." And he came and put his hand on her arm. "Presently, of course. Let me rest here a little while. It is paradise after." He paused. "You shall not rest," she said. "Go and sing something, Leigh." Then, as Stella looked up, she laughed. "Did you not know he could sing? He is a bad and wicked, indolent boy. He can do all sorts of things when he likes, but he never will exert himself. He will not sing now, will you?" He stood looking at Stella, as if constrained to speak, and looked at him. Stella raised her eyes. "Will you sing?" she said, almost inaudibly. As if waiting for a command, he bent his head and went to the piano. His fingers strayed over the notes, and slowly, for a moment or two, he said without turning his head, "Have you seen these flowers?" Stella did not wish to move, but a voice seemed to draw her. She rose and crossed up to the piano. He looked up. "Stay," he murmured. She hesitated for a second, and then stood with her downcast eyes, which, by the way, hidden as they were, seemed to feel his ardent gaze fixed upon her. He still touched the keys gently, and then, without further prelude, he began in a low voice. I wandered down the... Okay, I'm supposed to be singing this. It's a long song, so I'm not sure how it's gonna sound. I wandered down the valley in the eventide. The birds were singing sweetly in the summer air. The river glided, murmuring to the ocean wide, but still no peace was there. For love lay lurking in the ferny brake. I saw him lying with the bough beside. This might be the wrong melody, I'm so sorry. He cried, sweetheart, we will never be part. By the river in the valley at the eventide. With his eyes fixed on hers, he sang as if every word were addressed to her. His voice was like a flute, mellow and clear, and musical. But it was not the voice, but the words that seemed to sing in Stella's heart as she listened. It seemed to her that if he dared her to fly, to seek safety from him, his love, he seemed to say, he would pursue her in every quiet valley, on every mountainside. For a moment she forgot Lady Lenore, forgot everything. The musical voice, the dark eyes, and then her head drooped, her eyes closed. "'Tis all in vain you fly, for everywhere am I, in every quiet valley, on every mountainside. Was it to be with her? Would his presence haunt her everywhere? With a start, she turned from him and glided swiftly to the couch, as if seeking protection. Lady Lillian looked at her. "You're tired," she said. "I think I am." "Leicester, take her away. I will not have her worried, or she will not come again." "You will come again, will you not?" "Yes," said Stella. "I will definitely come again." Lord Leicester stood beside the open door, but Lillian still clung to her hand. "Good night," she said, and she put up her face. Stella bent and kissed her. "Good night," she answered, and then passed out. They went down the stairs in silence, and then reached the fernery. And then he stopped. He stopped short. "Will you not wait a moment here?" Stella shook her head. "It must be late," she said. "A moment only," he said. "Let me feel that I have you to myself. For a moment before you go. You have belonged to others until now." No, she said, "I must go." And she moved on, but he put his hand and stopped her. "Stella?" She turned and looked at him with the most piteously. But he saw only her loveliness before him, like a flower. "Stella, Stella," he repeated, and he drew her nearer. "I must speak. I must tell you. I love you." Okay. Okay, that is chapter 11. Yeah, that's going to be chapter 11. Are you guys enjoying your time? My god, it's spicy. Seems like there's a lot of things happening in the air. Very, very spicy. Okay. You almost fell asleep. Ah, that's good. You're supposed to fall asleep. It's okay. Do you guys want me to continue? Or do you guys want me to stop here? The chapter is quite long, you know. If I continue, it's going to be just as long. Hopefully my voice can survive me through the end. So what do you guys think? Do you guys want me to continue? I'll let you guys decide. Okay. In any case, that was a pretty decent chunk of the story. Lucio, what did I tell you? You need to stop. You need to save that for Silas. Okay. Thank you, Lucille. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, I will go into chapter 12. Does everyone want chapter 12? Or do you want me to stop here? Is this enough for today? It's going to be another... I think it's going to be another 15 minutes. It can be a bit... It's okay. I like stubborn girls. That's fine. Okay, tell you what, I will continue chapter 12. Let me see how long it is. Okay, it's actually quite long. Give me a second. It's okay, I guess. I'll continue. Lucille, thank you so much for the 7 roses. Please stop. You need it. That's enough for today. Enough, please. Please stop, please. Okay, I'll start with chapter 12 since we are at the peak of the story, right? Everyone wants to know what happens. Okay. I love you, he said. Only 3 words. Only 3 words, but only a woman can understand what those 3 words meant to Stella. Okay, thanks Lucille. Thank you, Fumiko. Thank you so much. Thank you for the corgi. Thank you for the corgi. Cute dog. Okay. She was a girl, a mere child. As Lady Winwood had said, never, save from her father's lips, had she heard those words before. Even now, she scarcely realized their full meaning. She only knew that his hand was upon her arm, that his eyes were fixed on hers with a passionate and fleeting moment, combined with a masterful power which she felt unable to resist. White and almost breathless, she stood, not downcast, for her eyes was drawn on his. All her maidenly nature rose and excited by this first declaration of a man's love. Stella, I love you, he repeated, and his voice sounded like some low, subtle music which ran through her ears, even after the words had died from his lips. Pale and trembling, she looked at him and put her hand to gently force his grasp from her arm. No, she panted. But it is a yes, he said, as he took her other hand and held her a close prisoner, looking into the depths of the dark, wondering, troubled eyes. Stella, I love you, Stella. No, she repeated again, almost inaudibly. It is impossible. Impossible, he echoed, and with a faint smile flitted across the eager face, a smile that seemed to intensify the passion in his eyes. It seemed to be impossible not to love you. Stella, are you angry with me? Offended? I have been too sudden, too rude and rough, perhaps. At his tender pleading, her eyes drooped for the first time. Too rough, too rude. He, who seemed to be her type of knightly chivalry and courtesy. I should have remembered how pure and delicate a flower my beautiful love was, he murmured. I should have remembered that my love was a star, to be approached with reverence and awe, to not be taken by storm. I have been too presumptuous, but oh, Stella, you do not know what such love as mine is. It is like a mountain's torrent. It's hard to stem. It sweeps all before it. That is my love for you, Stella. And now, what will you say to me? As he spoke, he drew her still nearer to him. She could feel his breath stirring her hair, could almost hear the passionate beating of his heart. What should she say to him? If she allowed her heart to speak, she would hide her face and whisper, "Take me." But, girl as she was, she had some idea of all that divided them. The very place in which they stood, eloquent of the difference between them, between him, the future lord of Windward, and she, the poor painter's niece. Will you not speak to me? He murmured. Have you not a single word for me, Stella? If you knew how long I've heard, if you knew how I long to hear those beautiful lips, answer me with the words I have spoken, Stella. I will give you all I possess in the world, just for you to say, I love you. No, no, she said, almost pantingly. Do not ask me. Do not say any more. I cannot bear it. His face flushed hotly for a moment, but he held her tightly, and his eyes searched hers for the truth. Does it pain you to hear that I love you? He whispered. Are you angry? Sorry? Can you not love me, Stella? Oh, my darling, let me call you my darling. Mine, if only for once, for one short minute. See, you are mine. I hold you in both hands. Be mine for a short minute at the very least, while you answer me. Are you sorry? Can you not give me a little love in return for all the love I bear you? Can't you, Stella? Panting now, and with a rich color coming and going on her face, she looks this way and at some wild, timid animal seeking to escape. Do not press me. Do not force me to speak, she almost moans. Let me go now. No, he says, almost fiercely. You shall not. You must not go until you have answered me. Tell me, Stella, is it because I'm nothing to you, and you do not like to tell me so? Better the truth at once, hard it may be to bear, than suspense. Tell me now, Stella. It is not like that, she says, with a drooping head. What is it then? he whispers, and he bends his head to catch her faintly whispered words, so that his lips almost touch her face. From the drawing room comes the sound of someone playing. It recalls all the grandeur of the scene, all the high mightiness of the house to which he belongs, of which he is so nearly the head. He gives her strength. Slowly, she raises her head and looks at him. There is an infinite tenderness, an infinite yearning, and suppressed maidenly passion in her eyes. It is not that, but do you forget? Forget, he asks, patiently, gently, though his eyes are burning with impetuous eagerness. Do you forget who I am? Who you are? She says faintly. I forget everything except you are the most and most lovely and precious of all creatures on God's earth, he says, passionately. And then with a touch of his characteristical pride, what need have I to remember anything else, Stella? But I have, she said. Oh yes, it is for me to remember. I cannot. I ought not to forget. It is for me. I am only Stella Etheridge, an artist's niece, a nobody, an insignificant girl. And you, oh Lord Leicester. And I, he says, as if ready to meet her fairly at every point. And you, she looks around, you are a nobleman, will be the lord of all this beautiful place, of all that you were showing me the other day. You ought not to tell me that what you have just told me. He bent over her, and his hand closed on her arm, and with a masterful caressing touch. You mean that because what I am, that because I am rich, I'm going to be made poor? Because I have so much, too much, that one thing on earth which would make the rest worth having is to be denied me. He laughed almost fiercely. Better to be the poorest son of the soil than a lord of many acres. If that is true, Stella, but it is not. I do not care whether I am rich or poor, noble or nameless. Yes, I do. I am glad for your sake. I've never cared before. I've never realized it before, but I do now. I'm glad now. Do you know why? She shook her head. Because I can lay them all on your feet. And he says as he bends on one knee beside her, draws her hand with trembling hands to his heart. See, Stella, I lay them at your feet. I say take them. If you think them worth, then take them. Make them worth having. No, I say rather, share them with me. Set against your love, my darling, title, lands, wealth, are all worthless dross to me. Give me your love. Give me your love, Stella. I will have it. And he presses a passionate clinging kiss on her hand. Frightened by his vehemence, Stella draws her hand and shrinks away. He rises and draws her to a seat, standing beside her calm and penitent. Forgive me, Stella. I frighten you. See, I will be quite gentle and quiet, only if you listen to me. No, she murmurs, trembling. I must not. Think, if I have said you wish me to stay, how could I meet the Countess? What would they say to me? They would blame me for stealing your love. You have not stolen. No nun from a convent could have been more free to give me artifice than you, Stella. You have stolen nothing. It is I who had given you all. She shook her head. It is the same, she murmured. They would be so displeased. Oh, it cannot be. It cannot be, he repeated with a smile. But it has already come to pass. Am I one to love and unlove in a breath, Stella? Look at me. She raises her eyes and meet his eager, passionate gaze. Do I look like one to be swayed as a reed by any passing wind, gentle or rough? No, Stella, such love as I feel for you is not to be turned aside, even if you were to tell me that you cannot love me. My love will not die. It has taken root in my heart. It has become part of myself. There is not 1 hour since I saw you that I have not thought about you. Stella, you have come to me even in my sleep. I have dreamed that you whispered to me, I love you. Let the dream be a true one, oh Stella. My darling, let your heart speak. If it is to say it loves me. See, Stella, you are the world to me. Do not rob me of happiness. You do not doubt my love. Doubt his love. That was not possible for her to do, since every word, every look bore the impress of truth. But still she will not yield. Even as he spoke, she fancied that she could not see the stern face of the Earl looking at her with hard condemnation, could see the beautiful eyes of the Countess looking down at her with displeasure and wondering, amazed scorn. Footsteps were approaching. Even as he spoke, she fancied she could see the stern face of the Earl looking at her. But Lord Leicester was not a man to be turned aside. As she rose, he took her arm gently, tenderly, with loving persuasion, and drew her near to him. Come with me, he said. Do not leave me for a moment. See, the door is open. It is quite warm. We shall be alone here. Oh, my darling, do not leave me in suspense. She was powerless to resist, and he led her on the terrace outside, out into the dusky night, odorous with the breath of the flowers, mystical in the dim lights of the night sky. A gentle summer zephyr air stirred the trees. The sound of water falling over the weir. It came up like music on the hillside. A nightingale sang in the wood below them. All the night seemed full of slumberous passion and unspoken love. We are alone here, Stella. Now answer me. Listen once more. I'm not tired of telling you, and I shall never tire of it. Listen. I love you, Stella. I love you. The stars grew dull and misty before her eyes. The charm of his voice, of his presence, was stealing over her. The passionate love which burnt in her heart was for him finding its way through cool prudence. Her lips was tremulous. A sigh, long and deep, broke from them. I love you, Stella, he replied, as if the words were a spell, as indeed they were. A spell not to be resisted. Give me your answer, Stella. Come close to me. Whisper it. Whisper I love you. Or just send me away. But you will not do that, will you? No, you shall not do that. And forgetful of his vow to be gentle with her, he put his arm around her, drew her to him, and kissed Stella. It was the first kiss. A thrill ran through her. The sky seemed to sink. The world, the whole night, to pause as if it were waiting, with a little shudder of exquisite pleasure, mingled with that subtle pain with which ecstasy always brings in its train. She laid her head upon his breast, and hiding her eyes, I love you. If the words meant much to him, the man of the world, before whom many a beautiful woman had been ready to bow with a complacent homage, if they meant much to him, how much more did they mean to her? All her young maiden faith spoke in those 3 words. With them, she surrendered her young, pure life, unstained, unsullied heart to him, and with a passion as intense as his own, she repaid him tenfold. For a moment he was silent. He was fixed on the stars, his whole being thrilling under the music, the joy of this simple avowal. And then he pressed her to him and poured a shower of kisses upon her and upon her arm which lay across her breast. My darling, my darling, he murmured. Is it really true? Can I? Dare I believe it? You love me? Oh, my darling, the whole world seems to change to me now. You finally love me. See, Stella? It seems so wonderful that I cannot realize it. Let me see your eyes. I shall find the truth there. She pressed still a little closer to him, but he raised her head gently, and in his very touch was a caress, and it was as if his hands kissed her, and looked long into the rapt Anton eyes. And then he bent his head slowly and kissed her once, hungrily, clingingly. Stella's eyes closed and her face paled under the passionate caress. Then slowly, with a little sigh, she raised her head and kissed him back again. Kiss for a kiss. No words were spoken, side by side, and with her head upon his breast, they stood in silence. For them, time had vanished. The whole world seemed to stand still. Half amazed, and with a dim wonder at this new delight, which had entered her life. Stella watched the stars and listened to the music of the river. Something had happened. Something had happened to change her whole existence. It was as if the old Stella whom she knew so well had gone, and a new being, wonderfully blessed, wonderfully happy, had taken her place. And as for him, for the man of the world, he stood amazed, overwhelmed by the newborn joy. If anyone had told him that life had held such a moment for him, he would not have believed such a thing. He who had, as he thought, drained the cup of earthly pleasures to the dregs, his blood ran wildly through his veins, and his heart beat madly. At last, this is love. But suddenly, the awakening came. With a start, she looked up at him and strove to free herself vainly from his embrace. "What have I done?" she whispered, with an all-subdued voice. "Done," he murmured, with a rapt smile. "Made one man happier than he ever dreamed it possible for mortal to be. That is all." No," she said. "I have done wrong. I'm afraid. Afraid." "Afraid of what? There is nothing to make you afraid. Can you let me speak while you are in my arms? With your head on my chest. Lean back, darling. Now speak of fear." "Yes, even now," she whispered. "Now, even though I'm so happy," she broke off to herself. "So happy. Is it all a dream? Tell me." He bent and kissed her. "Is it a dream, do you think?" he answered. The crimson dyed her hair and face, and her eyes dropped. "And you are happy," he said. "Think what I must be, for a man's love is deeper, more passionate than a woman's, Stella. Think of what I might be." She sighed and looked at him. "But still, it is wrong. I fear that. All the world will say that." "All the world, Stella," he echoed. "What have we to do with the world? We two stand outside, beyond it. Our world is love, is our two selves, my darling." "All the world," she said. What will they say?" And instinctively she glanced over her shoulder at the great house, with the glow of light streaming from its windows. "Even now they are wondering where you are, expecting, waiting for you. What would they say if they knew you were here with me and all that had happened?" His eyes darkened. He knew better than she, with all fears, but what they would say, and he was already braving himself to meet the storm. But he smiled to reassure her. "They will say I'm the most fortunate of men. They will also say the gods have lavished their good gifts with both hands. They have given me all the things you make so much of, and the greatest of all things, the true soul love of a pure and beautiful angel." "Oh, hush, hush," she murmured. "It's true. You are an angel to me," he said simply. "I'm not worthy to touch the hem of your dress. If I could but live my worthless, sinful life all over again, for your sake, my darling, it should be purer and little less unworthy of you." "Oh, hush," she murmured. "You unworthy of me? You are my king. Strong man as he was stirred and moved to the depths of his being. The simple words, eloquent of her absolute trust and devotion. "Ah, my Stella," he murmured, "if you knew all this. But see, my life is yours henceforth, and I place it in your hands. Mold it as you will. It is yours from now on." She was looking at him, and all her soul in her eyes. At his words of passionate protest, a sudden thrill ran through her. Then, as instantly, as if a sudden cold hand had come between them, she shivered. "Mine," she breathed, "until they snatch it away from me." That is the end of chapter 12. That is the end of the current chapter. Do you guys enjoy that?